What's up, everyone? My name is Lilo, and you're listening to Delayed Reaction, a movie review podcast where I essentially go through and watch as many movies as humanly possible, trying to then talk about them in a seemingly eloquent manner, but usually stumbling through in a less than eloquent way. Anyway, thanks for joining me today. On this episode, we are going to talk about I guess this is the actual penultimate Alien movie in this new Alien trilogy, Alien Covenant, which was released in 2017, directed by Ridley Scott yet again. So he's continuing his overarching storyline of the aliens and, their backstory and lore and all that fun stuff. This one stars Michael Fassbender yet again, Catherine Waterston, and Billy Crudup, to name a few of the bigger names. This is a wild one, not gonna lie. So this movie picks up about 10 years after after Prometheus, which doesn't have the word alien in it, but it's just called Prometheus because, like I mentioned in the last episode, was a total bait and switch. Anyway, so this takes place 10 years after Prometheus. We find ourselves joining a crew of interstellar settlers. That's a fun thing to say. Interstellar settlers aboard the ship called the Covenant, because I've come to find out that the naming convention of these new movies is that they follow the names of these ships that are running into all these problems. They have about 2,000 people in cryo, and I can't remember how many human embryos on board. The embryos come into play towards the end of the movie. Also, before I continue forward, please consider this your spoiler warning. Even though this movie was released in 2017, there are probably still a number of you that have not seen it and or wish to see it prior to Alien Romulus coming out on a streaming service near you. So, if you haven't seen Alien Covenant, now's your chance to go pause my podcast and go watch it. I watched it on Hulu. Once you are done watching the movie, go ahead and come back here and we'll continue on. Okay, you back? Think of the movie? Did you watch the movie? Let's get into it. So, as I was saying, there are 2,000 space settlers in cryo sleep and a number of embryos on board as well. The crew is also on board in cryo sleep, and we can only imagine what's going to happen with all these people in cryo sleep. But once again, the good ship Covenant is being manned by an android, a synthetic humanoid named Walter, who is played by Michael Fassbender, who looks a lot like David. If you watched Alien, nope, not even Alien again. I'm gonna keep doing that. So yeah, here's your drinking game. The number of times that I say Alien Prometheus when the title of the movie is just Prometheus. Anyway, so you'll notice that Walter looks very much like David from Prometheus because he's played by Michael Fassbender, 1, and 2, he's essentially a clone of David from Prometheus. So you can see him running around doing his diagnostic things. He opens up a cool solar sail, which is pretty neat to see. But again, this goes back to a prequel movie that takes place before the primary canonical movies, involving brand new movie magic and special effects. You've got this fancy ship with fancy technology, including a solar sail, which, as it turns out, is the beginning of the end, really. Walter opens up the solar sail so they can, collect energy for the ship. And as the ship is flying through space, a electromagnetic pulse or some kind of a electromagnetic wave passes through, destroying the solar sail. Once the sail is destroyed, the crew members have to wake up out of cryo very violently. And I think a majority of them come out of cryo okay. One or no, just one. Just one is killed off in cryo sleep. And that, ironically enough, is the captain. So the captain dies, and we find out very quickly that the captain was beloved by the crew. He's replaced by his second in command, a gentleman by the name of Orem, played by Billy Crudup, who immediately begins to doubt himself and his crew's allegiance, which is going to be problems right from the start. Like, this whole movie really kind of hangs on the first 30 to 45 minutes. No, not even 45, like closer to 30 minutes of the movie, where you've got emergency cryo awakening and this second in command captain who is fairly, and I don't know why he does it this way, but he's like fairly unfit to lead simply from a mental standpoint, right? He is so bent on trying to prove himself as a worthy captain and trying to prove that despite the fact that he is a man of faith, which he repeats a couple of times, that he is a completely capable captain of manning this ship. And in real life terms, like, none of that would matter, but he lets it get to his head and it gets the better of him, and he really makes some awful decisions because of this. So crew goes off, fixes the ship. They end up finding a distress signal in space, and like all good space horror films, you got to go check out the distress signal. They alter their course completely because they're originally on course for a completely different planet. They alter their course radically. Go find this distress signal, land on this planet, and immediately upon upon landing on the planet, the crew begins to show their complete lack of training in new situations and begin to poke and prod at anything and everything. This one guy releases a bunch of spores, which he does not breathe in, oddly enough. Instead, it goes into his ear canal and infects him through the ear canal. Another group of folks goes in. This guy pokes a pod, and in the movie, you can see in the guy's light the spores emanating from this little pod that he stabs with his finger. You would imagine that as a new explorer on a new planet that your senses would be heightened and that you would notice these things even out of your periphery. But no, doesn't see them, makes no regard to them whatsoever, breathes them in pretty deeply. As you can well imagine, both dudes die and they spawn aliens that come out through them. And once again, the aliens are more of kind of like a tangential bad guy in this, because as this group of folks are trying to get back to their ship and find safe haven, they run into none other than David himself. They find the crashed ship from Prometheus, alien Prometheus. Then they, find David. He gives them shelter, and this is where it takes a turn, because there are a number of things that go on here. We've got David, who has been living on this planet for 10 years, and in that time, he has essentially bred aliens to become what they are now from the original Alien movies. In addition to that, like, you see that he has done complete genocide on the existing alien race that was on this planet, through the use of the spores on their ship that were meant to destroy humanity from Prometheus. And then, so Walter meets David, and David is immediately fascinated and taken by Walter and what can only be described as the most egotistical interactions that I have ever seen from literally any movie. Like there's there's a scene where David teaches Walter how to play this flute that he carved out from God knows what. I mean, maybe it's wood, maybe it's bone, because you find out that David had done wild experiments on Dr. Shaw from Alien Prometheus, which kind of brings me to a one of the things that I kind of noticed that was really kind of awful was, so you find out that David has done experiments on Dr. Shaw, and it has this scene where it has Dr. Shaw's body. This is towards the end of the movie, but it has this scene where Dr. Shaw is on the table and her body is completely wide open. I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, this movie is literally 10 years old from, if I'm understanding the timeline correctly. Yet somehow Dr. Shaw has remained very well preserved. Like, how? How? Maybe it's an alien planet. Maybe this is just one of those things that, Ridley Scott was like, meh, doesn't matter. She's been there. She's on this table, totally eviscerated. 10 years later, looks like it was done maybe a week ago. So, anyway, back to David and Walter's interactions. So besides teaching him out of the flute, David starts to kind of like lay these weird seeds of doubt that Walter is as benevolent as Walter seems. Like Walter kind of is this weird wishy-washy character where it's like he could be good, he's kind of bad. Maybe the Alien movies, of course, set you up as a viewer to be like, synthetics could be good, they could be bad. With Walter, the only thing you really know is that Michael Fassbender's not regular accent is weird, period. There's another scene where they interact and they talk about a poem. I can't remember the poem, but David quotes it as being from one author. Walter's like, who wrote that poem again? David's like, this one person. And Walter's like, no, no, no. It was actually Shelley. Oh, Byron. That's what David said. David's like, it's by Byron. Walter's like, no, it's Shelley. And he basically calls David out on having like a screw loose and not being all there. There's also a scene where David kisses Walter and he's like, I'm the only one that will ever love you, but I don't think Walter really cared about that because this is the point where synthetics start to kind of have their emotional aspects removed, but then they fight, and in another kind of bait and switch moment, right? It cuts to where you don't know who wins between David and Walter, and you don't find out until the very end of the movie when it's revealed that Walter is dead or Walter has been removed because you don't know if he's actually dead. And David is the one that brings everyone back on the ship. He gets back on the ship and they make way for their actual destination of this original planet. Somehow, David manages to smuggle 2 alien embryos onto the ship as well. And what you find out when with David's like experiments is that he's essentially the actual creator of the aliens, like I mentioned before. And through his genetic experimentation and through trials and whatever, he has bred them to become what we know. But what about that alien that popped out of the engineer from Alien Prometheus? Like, what happened to that dude? Is he still on that planet? Did he make it on board with David and Dr. Shaw? Like that's kind of a weird thread that never gets resolved. Maybe it gets resolved in Romulus. I don't know. Yeah, so that's the end of the movie. That's how the movie ends. You can imagine, though, I didn't fill in the blanks about like how the crew dispatches all the aliens, and literally the entire crew, save for two, three, plus David slash Walter, Walter David, fake Walter. So 3 out of a crew of like 12 make it off of the planet onto the ship and onto their next destination. Because you can't have it be an alien movie without having a high body count. There's a synopsis in not a very good nutshell. Anyway, thoughts and reactions immediately to this movie. Like I said, Michael Fassbender's fake American accent is weird. Like, I couldn't get past it. It was slightly unbelievable, and he was fighting it the entire time, and it's just like, "Ooh, okay, bro, just it's fine. It's fine. Just go back to your regular accent. We won't even notice. It'll be fine." But that's probably also to make the distinction between him and David. There was a ton of blood in this one, way, way gorier than previous Alien movies. Ridley Scott, I can only imagine, was just like, you know what, we really need to kind of amp this up a little bit. So not only are there going to be a lot of deaths, but there's also going to be a lot of really awful, horrifying deaths. The other thing that kind of came up is this idea of faith and God, right? At the beginning, when Orem starts questioning or starts to wonder if his faith is going to ruin his chances at being a captain. And that is directly mirrored through David essentially wanting to be God. He wants to be in control of this alien race, of this, what is, quote unquote, perfect species, which is, kind of this throughput or through line through these new alien movies, is this concept of that religion or God or faith is not put in the right places, incorrect, could be better. I'm not really sure, but that's kind of like a major underlying theme. This movie also felt very claustrophobic. It was kind of reminiscent of like the older Alien movies. So like Alien 1, ultra claustrophobic, very tense. Aliens, also very claustrophobic. Last thing, this absolutely fell into a number of horror movie bits, we'll call them. There's a scene where one of the crew members goes to wash up after David saves them. She ventures off by herself, knowing full well that there is an alien somewhere. And so she's like, I'm going to wash up, no problem. But one, you don't know what kind of water this is because this is an alien planet, but you're just going to wash yourself up in it anyway. Not smart, lady. Of course, she gets killed because she's by herself. The, the whole, let me show you something, or I've got something to show you, or could you follow me into this dark and scary room? Like that played out, and you knew immediately. And like, this is Orem who follows David, and David's the one who's like, come follow me and I'll show you what I've been up to these last 10 years. Walks Orem into this room that is essentially all alien babies, and of course, Orem gets killed. Oh, and then the towards the end when they're back on their ship and it's like celebration mode because they're all, off of the planet and they're trying to get back to their original destination. And of course, two of the crew members engage in sexy time. And that is one of the biggest, like, you two are gonna die. And of course they did. They did right there in the shower. Overall, I'd give this one a 3 out of 5. It was okay. Once again, moved the story along. Kind of fell into middle movie syndrome where it's trying to bridge the gap between the start and the end of the story. And it introduces some interesting things, right? Like the concept that David was the one that actually created the aliens, that David was also the destroyer of the engineers. It's okay. You definitely don't have to watch it. I don't think it'll be interesting to see how Romulus kind of ties all this back together. But I'm not going to be able to review that movie because it's going to come out because it came out this year, the year of our Lord 2024. So that will be for another time. But all that being said, let me know what you think of the movie Alien Covenant. Was it good? Was it bad? Could it have been done better? What do you think? Go ahead and put those in the comments below. I'd be happy to check them out there. Thanks for listening to this episode, and until next time.